the alien mercenaries had descended upon Earth with an arrogance that could only be born from millennia of unchecked conquest. Their arrival was marked not by diplomacy, but by overwhelming force, an effortless sweep across cities, armies, and defenses that left humanity reeling. To them, this small blue planet was just another in a long list of subdued worlds, a minor distraction on their journey through the galaxy. Their armor gleamed with the latest technology, weapons so advanced that human eyes struggled to comprehend them. In their minds, Earth's primitive warriors were no match for their might. As they surveyed the ruins of human cities from their hovering crafts, a peculiar conversation echoed through their ranks. It wasn't about Earth's military, which had already crumbled beneath their feet. Instead, they laughed at the notion of Earth's warrior traditions. Particularly, they found great amusement in the whispers of an ancient order, the ninjas. To them, tales of stealthy warriors hiding in the shadows, using mere blades in hand-to-hand combat, were relics of a bygone era, utterly insignificant in the face of their overwhelming technology. The mercenaries mocked the very idea of stealth in battle. Why hide when you could dominate outright? Why rely on subtlety when brute force, combined with superior firepower, could crush any opposition? For them, combat was a display of power and strength, not some hidden dance in the dark. They scoffed at the idea that any human, let alone an ancient warrior class, could pose a threat. Their leader, Commander Zocker, was particularly vocal in his disdain. He had conquered dozens of worlds, fought countless species, and never once had to worry about something as absurd as stealth warfare. The humans are fools if they think their outdated tactics can stand against us, Zocker boasted to his subordinates. His voice carried a tone of absolute certainty, a belief that this campaign on Earth would be little more than a formality. As they prepared for their final offensive to subjugate Earth's remaining strongholds, the alien mercenaries encountered nothing but silence from the human defenders. It wasn't the silence of submission, no. It was something more ominous. But arrogance blinds even the most advanced of beings, and the mercenaries chalked up the quiet as further proof of Earth's impending defeat. After all, what could these Earthlings possibly do? Their weapons were outdated, their tactics laughable. But while the mercenaries continued their careless mockery, deep in the shadows, Earth's most secretive warriors were preparing. The ninjas had always existed in the fringes of history, moving unseen, their presence only felt in the precise execution of their missions. Generations of tradition had taught them patience, cunning, and above all, how to use their enemies' arrogance against them. The ninjas watched as the aliens celebrated prematurely. They observed the mercenaries' patterns, their weaknesses, and their over-reliance on technology. These warriors knew that brute force alone could not win every battle. Victory lay in striking from the shadows, where the enemy was least prepared, using the very darkness that the aliens had dismissed. The alien soldiers had grown careless, their guard was down, their focus fixed on what they believed to be the last of Earth's conventional defenses. They had no way of knowing that the real threat lay in the unseen, in the silence they had so foolishly mocked. In their ignorance, they didn't realize that Earth had been fighting wars long before their kind even knew the concept of interstellar travel. The ninjas moved with precision, infiltrating alien camps without leaving a trace. They sabotaged power systems, disabled weaponry, and sent entire platoons into chaos before vanishing as quickly as they had appeared. The aliens, so reliant on their technology to detect threats, found themselves flailing in the dark. For the first time, they were vulnerable, and they had no idea how to counter an enemy they couldn't see. Panic began to spread among the alien ranks. It was a slow burn at first, mere whispers of phantoms in the dark. But the terror grew as more and more alien soldiers were picked off. One by one, their bodies found in the morning, throats slit with surgical precision. The mercenary sensors could detect no movement, no heat signatures, nothing. The fear that had once been the sole domain of humanity now crept into the hearts of these alien invaders. Zocker, though still dismissive, couldn't ignore the reports any longer. He believed that it was some malfunction in their technology, perhaps an environmental anomaly on this strange planet. It couldn't be these ninjas the humans spoke of, that was impossible. And yet, his soldiers were dying, and the once unstoppable advance had ground to a halt. His arrogance, however, still blinded him to the reality of the situation. The ninjas, in contrast, remained focused. They had trained for moments like this for centuries, honing their skills in the shadows where no one could see or predict their next move. Every strike was calculated, every movement deliberate. The aliens, for all their advanced technology, were nothing more than targets. Their armor, their sensors, their weapons all useless when they couldn't detect the enemy. The ninjas knew this, and they exploited it with ruthless efficiency. Word began to spread among the remaining human forces about the success of the ninja operations. Stories of alien forces being decimated by unseen warriors boosted morale. The ninjas were proving that Earth's strength lay not in its weapons, but in its ability to adapt, to turn the enemy's strength into weakness. As more alien camps fell to the ninjas' silent attacks, the balance of power began to shift. The mercenaries, who had once laughed at Earth's warriors, were now terrified. They had mocked the very idea of stealth, of fighting from the shadows, and now those shadows were consuming them. In their arrogance, they had failed to understand that power isn't always loud sometimes, it moves in silence, unseen until it strikes when least expected. The ninjas were not just surviving, they were thriving in the midst of the alien occupation. Their tactics, honed over centuries, fit perfectly into this new war. They had learned to adapt to the alien technology, using it against their foes, turning what the mercenaries thought were strengths into glaring weaknesses. While the aliens were proud of their heavy armor and their reliance on detection systems, the ninjas used the terrain, darkness, and their understanding of human limitations to outmaneuver and dismantle the enemy. Earth's defenders had been scattered and disorganized in the face of the alien invasion, but the ninjas were never part of any formal military. They were accustomed to operating outside the regular systems of power, moving in the spaces between governments and armies, answering to no one but their code. This autonomy allowed them to act swiftly and decisively while the aliens assumed they had already crushed any organized resistance. The alien mercenaries, for all their technological prowess, had no answer for this. They continued to try to fight the ninjas with brute force and advanced weaponry, but they were attempting to swat at shadows. The ninjas could strike anywhere, at any time, and they did so with a precision that left the mercenaries bewildered. An alien platoon would vanish overnight, key installations would go dark, and command structures were eroded one by one. And still, the aliens had no clear understanding of who or what they were up against. Reports of their defeats trickled in, each more confusing than the last. How could such a primitive enemy be so effective? How could humans, who had seemingly been on the verge of surrender, suddenly turn the tide? The aliens had grown complacent, confident that their advanced technology would shield them from any real threat. But technology alone wasn't enough. It didn't account for human ingenuity, for the centuries of discipline and strategy ingrained in Earth's ninjas. As the ninjas continued their silent war, the alien ranks began to crack. Fear spread like wildfire through the mercenaries' camps. Commanders who had once been so certain of their superiority now struggled to keep their forces together. The aliens had never faced an enemy like this before, an enemy that refused to fight them on their terms. The ninjas' strategy wasn't just to win battles, it was to break the alien spirit, to turn their arrogance into doubt. Zocker, the alien commander, could feel control slipping through his fingers. He was losing soldiers, losing ground, and worst of all, he was losing the respect of his troops. The same soldiers who had once laughed alongside him at the idea of Earth's ninjas were now hesitant, unsure of what to believe. There were no heroic charges, no glorious victories, only a slow and steady erosion of their forces at the hands of an invisible enemy. Zocker's pride had blinded him to the reality of the situation for far too long, and now it was too late to fully regain control. The ninjas were relentless. They continued their attacks with precision, striking at key points that the aliens had thought secure. They didn't need to overwhelm the alien forces, they only needed to destabilize them. The mercenaries' reliance on technology had made them predictable. They had no contingency plan for an enemy they couldn't see or understand. Their strategies, effective against other technologically advanced species, were useless against a foe that fought not with weapons, but with tactics born from centuries of stealth and cunning. And it wasn't just the physical attacks that were taking a toll on the alien forces. The psychological warfare was just as damaging. The ninjas knew that fear was a weapon as powerful as any blade. The mercenaries, once proud and fearless, were now paranoid. They questioned every shadow, jumped at every sound, unsure if death was waiting for them in the darkness. The ninjas had turned the very environment of Earth against the aliens, using the planet's unfamiliar terrain, its cities, its forests, and its darkness as their allies. The alien soldiers, once so unified in their conquest, began to turn on each other. Suspicion spread among the ranks, with some accusing their comrades of incompetence, others whispering about betrayals. The unity that had once been their greatest strength was now fracturing. And through it all, The ninjas remained unseen, watching as their enemies slowly crumbled from within. Zalkar's frustration reached its breaking point. He ordered sweeps of the areas where his forces had been attacked, deploying his most advanced sensors, sending entire squads to search for these elusive warriors. But the ninjas were always one step ahead. For every squad that went out, only a few returned, and those who did came back with tales of seeing nothing, only to find their comrades had been taken out right under their noses. The ninjas didn't need to engage in open combat. They let the alien mercenaries exhaust themselves chasing phantoms while they conserved their strength, waiting for the perfect moments to strike. The balance of power was shifting, and the aliens, who had once seemed invincible, were now vulnerable. As the pressure mounted, Zalkar knew he had to make a decision. His forces were being systematically dismantled, and he had no idea how to stop it. The arrogance that had once defined his command was now a liability. He couldn't simply overwhelm the enemy with superior firepower, not when that enemy refused to meet him in the open. He needed a new strategy, but he was running out of time. Meanwhile, the ninjas remained patient. They knew that the alien forces were on the verge of collapse, that all they had to do was continue their campaign of calculated strikes. The mercenaries' numbers were dwindling, and with each loss, the aliens dropped further. The ninjas didn't need to rush, they had already won the psychological war. Now, they just had to finish what they had started. The aliens, once so confident in their dominance, were now retreating into their own fear. The ninjas had achieved what they had set out to do. They had turned the aliens' greatest strength, their technology, into a weakness. The mercenaries had underestimated Earth's warriors, and now they were paying the price. The moment had come for the ninjas to strike decisively. Their meticulous planning had led to this point, where the alien mercenaries, once arrogant and unchallenged, were now vulnerable and desperate. The ninjas had dismantled the enemy piece by piece, but the true test of their strategy would be in the final assault. Their objective was clear: dismantle the alien command structure, break their will to fight, and force them to retreat from Earth. By now, the alien forces had been significantly weakened. Their advanced technology, once a symbol of their superiority, had been rendered ineffective by the ninjas' tactics. The mercenaries were used to direct engagements, battles that could be won through sheer firepower. But they had never faced an enemy that could move through the shadows, invisible to their sensors and immune to their intimidation. Each time the aliens thought they were ready, the ninjas struck from a place they didn't expect. The alien command center, located deep within their encampment, was heavily fortified. Zalkar and his remaining officers believed they were safe here, surrounded by the best security their technology could offer. But safety was an illusion, and the ninjas knew it. They had spent weeks studying the patterns, the routines, and the weaknesses in the alien defenses. Every detail mattered, every movement, every shift in the alien security systems. The ninjas didn't need brute force to penetrate the alien stronghold, they needed patience and precision. The final phase of the operation began without fanfare. The ninjas had no need for dramatics. Their work was in the silent, methodical dismantling of their enemy. While the mercenaries slept, while their guard was down, the ninjas moved in. No alarms were triggered, no security systems detected their presence. They were invisible, just as they had trained to be. The alien soldiers, already on edge from weeks of attacks, were oblivious to the danger creeping ever closer to their leaders. Inside the command center, Zalkar and his officers were still reeling from the continuous losses. Reports had become fewer and farther between as their communication lines were slowly cut off. They were isolated, unable to coordinate with their scattered forces. The alien commander had been a figure of dominance and control, but now his confidence had eroded. Each failure chipped away at his authority, and his officers, once blindly loyal, began to question his leadership. They didn't understand how a technologically inferior species had managed to outsmart them at every turn. What Zalkar failed to grasp was that this wasn't a battle of weapons or numbers, it was a battle of strategy, one the ninjas had been mastering for generations. They had no intention of fighting the aliens on their terms. Instead, they forced the mercenaries to fight a war they couldn't win. The alien soldiers had been broken long before the final assault, their morale shattered by the ninjas' relentless attacks. Now, with their command in disarray, the end was inevitable. As the ninjas infiltrated the heart of the alien camp, they moved with the same precision that had brought them this far. There were no wasted movements, no unnecessary risks. Every action was calculated, every step designed to bring them closer to their target. The aliens, despite all their technological advantages, were powerless to stop them. The ninjas knew exactly where to strike key systems, power sources, communications. With each precise hit, the alien defenses crumbled further, leaving Zalker and his officers more vulnerable than ever. Now, with their command in disarray, the end was inevitable. As the ninjas infiltrated the heart of the alien camp, they moved with the same precision that had brought them this far. There were no wasted movements, no unnecessary risks. Every action was calculated, every step designed to bring them closer to their target. The aliens, despite all their technological advantages, were powerless to stop them. The ninjas knew exactly where to strike key systems, power sources, communications. With each precise hit, the alien defenses crumbled further, leaving Zalker and his officers more vulnerable than ever. It wasn't long before the ninjas reached the command center itself. The mercenaries stationed there had no idea what was coming. In the dead of night, the ninjas moved swiftly, neutralizing the guards before they could raise any alarms. For all their strength and firepower, the alien soldiers stood no chance against an enemy they couldn't even see. Inside the command room, the realization that something had gone terribly wrong began to dawn on Zalker. He could feel it, the sudden silence, the absence of his guards, the flicker of lights as the power systems failed. His officers, once so sure of their invincibility, were now gripped by fear. They had heard the stories of the ninjas, dismissed them as myths. But now, those myths were becoming reality. Zalker, for all his arrogance, couldn't deny it any longer. He had underestimated these humans, and now it was too late to recover. The ninjas entered the command center without resistance. The mercenaries had been so sure that their technology would protect them, that their sensors and security systems would detect any threat. But the ninjas had moved beyond detection, beyond the limitations of the technology the aliens relied on so heavily. Zalker and his officers were now at their mercy. There was no grand battle, no dramatic confrontation. The ninjas had no need for such displays. They had already won, not through force, but through strategy, discipline, and the careful exploitation of their enemies' weaknesses. Zalker, once a symbol of alien superiority, now stood defeated not by a stronger foe, but by one that had outsmarted him at every turn. The aliens, leaderless and broken, had no choice but to retreat. Their mission to conquer Earth had failed, not because of the humans' weapons, but because they had underestimated a group of warriors who had mastered the art of stealth and patience. The ninjas had done what no one else could. They had turned the tide of an unwinnable war through sheer cunning. As the aliens fled, leaving behind their once mighty empire in ruins, the ninjas faded back into the shadows. Their victory would never be sung in songs or written in history books. They didn't need recognition. Their mission had always been clear: protect their world, no matter the cost, no matter the enemy. And they had done just that, without ever revealing themselves to the world they had saved. The aliens' retreat from Earth was swift and chaotic. What had begun as an assured conquest had turned into a desperate scramble for survival. Their ships, once symbols of dominance in the skies, now fled under cover of darkness, barely holding together after the relentless sabotage by the ninjas. The mighty alien fleet that had once instilled terror in human hearts was reduced to scattered remnants, licking their wounds and reeling from the shock of defeat. For the ninjas, this moment was not one of celebration. They didn't need recognition or accolades. Their duty had been fulfilled. The war had never been about glory for them. It had been a matter of survival, of protecting their home from an enemy that believed themselves superior. The ninjas had done what they always did. They assessed their enemies' weaknesses, exploited them, and disappeared into the shadows before anyone could fully comprehend what had happened. Earth had been saved, not by advanced technology or overwhelming force, but by a handful of warriors who understood that the mind was the greatest weapon of all. As the remaining alien forces limped away from the planet, their pride shattered. The full magnitude of what had happened began to sink in. The mercenaries, once so confident in their ability to dominate, were now grappling with the fact that they had been bested not by an advanced technological race, but by a species they had deemed primitive. Zalker, their commander, was no longer the fearless leader who had once commanded their respect. He was a symbol of failure, a reminder that arrogance had cost them everything. The aftermath of the conflict left the alien mercenaries deeply scarred, both physically and mentally. Many of them had never known defeat, never experienced fear on the battlefield. But now, fear was all they knew. Their enemies had never shown themselves fully, never engaged in open combat, and yet the alien forces had been systematically dismantled. The ninjas had mastered the art of making their presence felt without being seen, and it had driven the aliens to the brink of madness. Zalker, in particular, found himself haunted by the defeat. The fall from grace was swift and unforgiving. The other mercenary commanders, scattered across the galaxy, would hear of this failure, and Zalker knew there would be no mercy. He had led his forces into a battle they had no hope of winning, blinded by his own arrogance and his inability to see beyond brute force. Now, his name would be synonymous with failure, a cautionary tale for others who believed that superior technology was all that mattered in war. As the alien fleet retreated, Earth began to rebuild. The human governments were quick to claim victory, presenting the retreat as a triumph of their military strategies. But the truth was known only to a select few. The ninjas, who had operated in the shadows, would never be acknowledged by the broader population. They didn't need to be. Their victory wasn't for the world to see, it was for the world to continue, safe from the threat of conquest. The ninjas themselves returned to their hidden lives, slipping back into the routines that had sustained their order for centuries. For them, this was just another battle in a long history of defending their land. They had faced enemies before, and they would face enemies again. The aliens had been formidable, yes, but they were not invincible. No enemy was invincible, not if you understood how to exploit their weaknesses. The ninjas had proven that time and time again, and they would continue to do so as long as the world needed them. Zalker, now a shadow of his former self, couldn't shake the humiliation of the defeat. His once loyal officers had turned against him, blaming him for their losses, for underestimating an enemy they barely understood. The alien commander, who had once led with confidence, now faced the harsh reality of his own miscalculations. He had believed that Earth's warriors were relics of a bygone era, irrelevant in the face of his advanced armies. But those same warriors had shown him the folly of that belief. They had struck from the shadows, and now Zalker's reputation lay in ruins. The alien mercenaries, now leaderless and scattered, would take a long time to recover from the damage inflicted upon them. Their ships were damaged, their morale broken, and their once unshakable unity had fractured under the weight of their defeat. Many of them would never return to their home worlds, too ashamed to face the disgrace of what had happened. The survivors carried with them the knowledge that they had been bested by an enemy they couldn't even see. The lessons learned from the conflict were not lost on the galaxy at large. Other alien factions, hearing of the defeat, would think twice before underestimating Earth. The humans, it seemed, had more than just technology at their disposal. They had a resilience, a cunning that could not be easily overcome. The alien mercenaries had learned this the hard way, and now their failure served as a warning to others. Back on Earth, the ninjas resumed their lives as if nothing had happened. Their work was done, and they had no need for the attention or praise of the public. They knew that the world would move on, oblivious to the dangers it had narrowly escaped. But the ninjas would always be watching, always ready to step in when needed. The shadows were their home, and from there, they would continue to protect the world, unseen and unthanked, as they had always done. For the alien mercenaries, Earth had been a lesson in humility. They had come expecting an easy victory, but they had left with nothing but defeat and the knowledge that no matter how advanced their technology, there were forces in the universe that couldn't be measured by the strength of one's weapons. The ninjas had shown them that sometimes the greatest power comes not from what you can see, but from what you can't. The galaxy had long viewed Earth as an insignificant world, a backwater planet with limited technological advancements compared to the vast interstellar empires. But that perception had shifted drastically after the alien mercenaries' defeat. Rumors spread quickly across distant worlds, stories of a human force capable of striking down technologically superior invaders without ever revealing themselves. Many dismissed the tales as exaggerations, attributing the aliens' failure to incompetence or bad luck. But those who knew the truth understood that Earth had proven itself in a way no one had anticipated. The ninjas, however, were not concerned with the galaxy's changing perceptions. They returned to their centuries-old practice of living in the shadows, their presence known only to a few. To them, this was just another threat vanquished, another victory in a long history of silent battles. Their role had always been to defend, not to seek glory or recognition. What mattered was that Earth was safe, and they were ready to protect it again if needed. For the human governments, the victory over the alien mercenaries became a powerful symbol. Propaganda machines spun the narrative of Earth's military might overcoming a superior enemy, giving credit to high-ranking officials and advanced defense strategies. Politicians used the victory to rally public support, pushing the idea that humanity could stand against any future invaders. But while the world celebrated, the true heroes remained in the shadows, continuing their training, knowing that this victory was just one step in a much larger journey. Across the galaxy, other alien factions observed the aftermath with keen interest. The defeat of the Mercenaries had sent shockwaves through the interstellar community. Many had considered Earth an easy target, a planet ripe for conquest. But now, they were uncertain. How could a world with such primitive technology have defeated one of the most feared mercenary armies in the galaxy? It was a question that gnawed at alien leaders and strategists alike. In dark corners of the galaxy, whispers of the human ghost warriors circulated. These whispers painted the ninjas as mythic figures, almost supernatural in their ability to strike unseen. Some claimed that Earth had developed some new form of cloaking technology, while others believed the stories of ancient warrior traditions. The truth, of course, was far simpler, and yet far more profound. The ninjas had not used advanced technology to defeat the aliens. They had relied on something much older, something more enduring: discipline, patience, and the art of deception. The galaxy, in all its complexity, was filled with races that prided themselves on their advanced weaponry, their powerful starships, and their technological achievements. But the ninjas had shown that wars were not always won with the latest innovations. Sometimes, wars were won with the simplest of strategies, executed with precision and skill. The alien mercenaries had underestimated this truth, and it had cost them everything. Zalker, now in exile, lived with the weight of his failure. He had once been one of the most feared commanders in the galaxy, but now his name was spoken with scorn. His defeat at the hands of the humans had stripped him of his rank, his status, and his pride. But more than anything, it had left him with a question that he could not answer: how had he been bested by an enemy so seemingly primitive? He had analyzed the battle over and over in his mind, searching for where he had gone wrong. But the answer eluded him. In truth, it wasn't his tactics or his technology that had failed him, it was his arrogance. The lesson of Earth's victory was one that would resonate for generations. It wasn't just about the defeat of the alien mercenaries. It was about the broader implications of underestimating one's enemies. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species, each with their own strengths and weaknesses. But the defeat on Earth was a reminder that power didn't always come from superior technology. Sometimes power came from knowledge of the terrain, an understanding of one's opponent, and the willingness to strike when the time was right. On Earth, life returned to normal, or as normal as it could be, after such an invasion. The scars left by the alien assault would take time to heal, but the people of Earth were resilient. They rebuilt their cities, their infrastructure, and their lives. Few knew of the ninjas' involvement in the victory, and that was how the ninjas preferred it. Their way of life had always been to operate in the background, influencing events without ever becoming the focus of them. They had no need for parades or celebrations. Their reward was in the safety of their homeland and the knowledge that they had fulfilled their duty once again. The alien mercenaries had learned a harsh lesson, one that other would-be conquerors would take to heart. Earth was no longer seen as a weak target, ripe for the taking. The defeat of the mercenaries had cast a long shadow, one that would deter future invaders. The humans had proven that they were not to be underestimated, and the galaxy took notice. But for the ninjas, this was just one victory in a never-ending cycle of conflict and protection. They knew that Earth would face more threats in the future, whether from within or from beyond the stars. The universe was vast and full of dangers, but as long as the ninjas stood watch, they would be ready. They had fought in the shadows for centuries, and they would continue to do so, unseen and unrecognized, for as long as the world needed them. The alien mercenaries had mocked Earth's ninjas, but in the end, it was the ninjas who had the last word. They had struck from the shadows, dismantled a seemingly invincible force, and faded back into obscurity, leaving behind a legacy that would echo across the stars. The galaxy had learned that Earth's defenders were not to be trifled with, and though the ninjas would never seek fame or recognition, their actions would be remembered, whispered in dark corners of the universe as a tale of unexpected triumph.